Okay, now we're going to make the pork-filled buns. The first thing we have to do is make the dough. Now remember, we have already made the oven barbecued pork. Okay, it is cooling so that it will be ready to make, ready to fill, because we need the ingredients totally cool, otherwise they cook the dough as you're putting it in, and then we end up with tough bits, and it's not so great. Anyway, this is something I've learned from experience, so let's save you some effort, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to heat some milk, okay? I've already heated it, and you can either use the fingertip method to find out how warm it is. You can use a instant read digital thermometer like what I used for the meat. Just make sure it does not touch the bottom of the pan or it'll give you an incorrect reading. Or you can use something like this, which is very handy, especially for like making candies and stuff like that, because then you don't have to dip anything into the sugar syrup, which can end up causing crystallization later. But that's for another project. So I used that to measure out the temperature of my milk, and we need to make sure it is not any warmer than 120 degrees. If you accidentally get it a little warmer, it's okay. Don't panic. Just pull it off the heat, let it cool off, okay? It will come down in temperature, and then you can use it. So, haven't lost anything yet. Okay, life's good. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to make the dough. We have here the first part of the flour and the yeast. Okay, the yeast is an active dry yeast, okay, which means it doesn't actually require pre-proofing, unlike many other things. So now if you wish to pre-proof it, that's okay. It's just going to add a little bit more water to the dough, and then it's going to mean you have to add a little bit more flour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the milk that is no warmer than 120 degrees and add it to the flour and the yeast. And let's start stirring. Now I'm going to add the sugar. Okay, and yes, you want to add the sugar and the salt definitely separately, because if you add them together and they both come in contact with the yeast, it will kill off the yeast before you're ready for it to stop working. So now I add some oil. Okay. And yes, this is the order I like to do it in, because then, like I said, it helps keep the salt away from the yeast so that it doesn't cause it to kill off the yeast, because we definitely want this to rise. Okay, now we're adding the little bit of salt. Now you do need the salt, because bread made without salt has a tendency to, it doesn't quite taste right. Okay, the salt adds just a little bit of flavor to this whole thing and makes it more filling, actually, I think is the best way to describe it. Now, this is about as far as I can take it with a spoon, and this is part of the reason why before we start cooking, we not only tie back our hair, we also wash our hands. Now, as you can see, this is still a very wet dough, okay? This is too wet, so I need to add some more flour. Okay. Get those hands in there, start working it around, okay? Oh, still need some more. It is still going to make kind of soft dough, but not nearly as soft as like the biscuit dough. that we made before, okay? And this is just about perfect. Yeah, see, I still have a lot stuck to my hands, but this type, it's holding together, okay? We don't have to worry too much about really kneading it a lot, because unlike some of the cooking shows, we're not worried about the window pane method. Okay, this needs just a little bit more. It's still too sticky. Now, the window pane method, when they're talking about that for making yeast doughs, is when you can take it up, pick it up, and stretch it, and you can actually see through it, but it doesn't break immediately at that point. Okay, so almost perfect. I just want a little bit more there. Now, this is something it can take a little bit to get the feel for. That's okay. Experiment. Try this out. And if you want to add a little bit more flavor to the dough, go for it. If you happen to like your pork-filled buns with bits of onion in the dough, hey, go for it. Just remember, anything you add, if it's cooked, it has to be cooled completely before you add it to the dough. Otherwise, it starts cooking the dough, and then you end up with those clumpy bits. Okay, now this is a good dough. Okay, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in. I'm going to pull it out of the bowl. Okay, I'm actually going to add a little bit of oil to the dough, or to the bowl. And what the oil does is it helps keep the dough from sticking to the bowl really bad or drying out in parts. So, a little bit of oil, put the dough in, turn it over, and it helps keep it from drying. So this is a trick, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to cover this, and we're going to let it rise for about an hour. So yeah, this is one of those recipes where you do stuff, and then you have to wait, and then you do stuff again, and you have to wait some more. So let's cover this and let it sit in a room temperature place for about an hour. Okay. Now I have to go wash my hands again. Right? But that's an easy way to knead dough. Kneading dough by hand is not really hard to do. It can just take a little bit of time, a little bit of muscle, but it can be done by hand. You don't need a fancy machine for this, okay? So I'm going to pause this now, and we'll come back after the dough's risen and get everything else ready to go. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to start making the filling for the pork-filled buns. Remember, we already made the oven barbecued Chinese pork. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to fry up some little bit of finely minced onion and some garlic in a frying pan. Okay, we need a little bit of oil for this so that it doesn't stick. Okay, now you might want to do yourself a favor. Instead of having to mince up the garlic yourself, there is no problem with getting some stuff that's already minced. Okay, I love this stuff. And we're going to be using some ginger in this too. So a step that will make your life a lot easier is pre-minced ginger. They also have pre-minced garlic like this. Okay, makes life so much easier. But if you don't happen to have fresh ginger, I will have in the instructions in the list of ingredients how much to use for dry ginger if you have to do that. Okay, I prefer to use fresh for this, but there is no reason why dry ginger would make just as well. Now what we want to do is we want to get this onion fried up a little bit, not over fried, because we don't want to caramelize it, but we do want to soften it up. Okay, and then we'll be adding some more ingredients to this, and it is going to be wonderful. And I know pork-filled buns can seem like a really advanced thing to try to make, and it can be a little bit scary, but trust me, you can do this. We'll go through this one step at a time, and we'll get through it, okay? That's the way I do all this stuff, one step at a time, no matter how complicated it seems. Now, the garlic is starting to smell fragrant. The onion is starting to soften up a little bit. So, what I'm going to do now is I am going to add some of the oven barbecued pork that I made, that I've chopped up into little tiny pieces. Okay? Now, I tend to make a little bit more filling than some people might think is necessary, but I don't like these pork-filled buns that have barely anything in them. Okay, so I also have a slight tendency to overstuff, but you know what? That is what I like. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take some water, okay, as this is going, and we're going to take some cornstarch and some sugar and stir it into the water, okay? Now, see, the cornstarch dissolves really, really nicely, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the soy sauce with the ginger, okay? See? Stirs in really easy, not a problem. And a couple of the added advantages of using cornstarch instead of flour. You can use flour for this, but you'll have a little bit more of a problem with lumping, okay? So cornstarch does not get lumpy as easy, and has the added advantage of when you heat it up again, it reliquefies. So now we have that mixture added in. I'm just going to get all nice and gravy-like. Yes. Oh, this is almost perfect already. So I'm going to turn off the heat now because the pan's still hot enough. Make sure all the nice little bits of meat are coated. Then we're going to set this aside and get ready to form the dough, because remember, we already made the dough for this. Okay, and it's about ready to go. It's ready to go. So this is ready. Set it aside. Let it cool off a little bit, and form the dough into the shape that I want for the buns. And then we're going to steam those puppies, and it is awesome. So hold on. I'll be right back with you. Okay, the next step we have to do is to form the dough. Now remember, we already made the dough and it's had a chance to rise. Okay, now it might not make a lot of sense to people who aren't used to it, but this is nicely risen bread dough. The first thing we do after we've gone to all the trouble to make it rise is we go ahead and we punch it down. Get all that excess air out of it, okay? Because what we're trying to do is, believe it or not, if you can let the dough rise a couple of times, it actually makes it, it helps form the flavor a little bit more, okay? Letting it rise more than once makes for a much, much milder flavor, but this is a really mild flavored dough, so we don't have to worry about that so much. Okay, so now we're taking the dough for this batch. we take the dough, we divide it into 10 pieces. Okay, so let's see. Now each one of these needs to be 5, roughly. They don't have to be perfectly the same size, okay? It's okay. I mean, it would be very, very difficult to get them all perfectly the same size unless you weigh them out by this little bit and this little bit. So let's go ahead and just rough it out here. Okay, there we go. We have 10 pieces, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to set these aside, except for one. And that one we're going to roll. We're going to mash this puppy down. And then we're going to take a rolling pin and make it nice and kind of biggish. Okay, it's not going to get really big because this is a springy dough and likes to get back into shape. Okay, but that's okay. And the reason why we turn as we're rolling is to make sure it doesn't stick to the mat or to the countertop. I like to use a pastry mat because it reduces the amount of cleanup. But honestly, part of the reason I like where I am right now, I have marble countertops and they are excellent for keeping pastry dough cool as you're working it. So even through a pastry mat, it helps keep it cool. But I have done the same thing on some of the cheapest countertops I have ever seen and had it work out. So some things just make it a little bit easier. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this here and we're going to take some of this here. Nice healthy spoon. Like I said, I like to overstuff mine a little bit, okay? So, and then we're going to go like this, and we're going to go like this. Okay? And we're going to bring it up, and we're going to squeeze, and we're going to close up all these little corners here so it doesn't all leak out, okay? Then, nice little twist and squeeze. Okay, now it's okay if it comes apart a little bit as it's cooking. That happens. It's still perfectly good. It's still perfectly edible. Mine are not the prettiest in the world, but the most important thing is they taste good. So take your time. Go ahead and get this worked out. Okay. And then after I've got all these shaped, I'll come back and we'll get going on the next part of this project. Like I said, this is a little bit more advanced recipe, but one step at a time and we can do it, okay? So bear with me and let's have some fun with this. Okay, now we're going to cook those buns. Now this is a cooking method called steaming. We actually cook it with the steam. So the first step is to oil the surface. Take a paper towel with some vegetable oil or something like that and oil the surface that the buns are going to be sitting on, okay? This helps keep them from sticking, and there are a couple other tricks you can do if you don't want to do that, but they are more time consuming. So let's settle for the oiling. Now we've brought the water to boil inside the steamer. As you can see, I've actually got a pretty nice steamer. I know not everyone has one this nice, so after I get these going, I'm going to show you another trick in case you don't have a steamer. So, put these in here. As you can see, some of these are a little smaller than other ones. Now, I have another layer for my steamer, which is part of the reason I really like it so much. and we put the rest in. Now, unfortunately, like I said, I have a tendency to overstuff my buns. So I made some little rolls with the rest of the dough. And now we're going to let the water boil. We're going to cover this, and these will be ready in about 20 minutes. Okay. Now, since we have those going and I can safely let them work for a little bit, I'm going to show you another trick. If you don't have a steamer, okay, what you can do is you can make a fakey steamer, okay, which is a pot of water, okay, a metal strainer that can go on top. Now it can be like this, it can be a basket strainer, whatever, okay, but you have to be able to have it over the pot, but not touching the boiling water, okay? So if it sits down into the pot, that's going to reduce the amount of water you can have in there. So you have to really watch it to make sure it doesn't boil dry, okay? And then a lid to go over the top to try to trap as much of the steam as you can, okay? An old-fashioned double boiler will work for this, okay? But the biggest thing is steam has to be able to come in and cook it. And you want to try to trap as much as you can. Like I said, this will take about 20 minutes to cook. Then we'll come back, take a look at them, and enjoy. And you can fill these with so many different things. You don't have to use the recipe I used. I had some very tasty filled with a chicken filling, okay, and just about anything you might want. But this is a basic starter recipe to get you familiar with it and give you a chance, okay? So we'll come back in a few minutes and take a look at this. Okay, now they're finally done. Let's pull one of these out and take a look at it. Now, they will rise while they are steaming, okay? As you can see, even though we were cooking these, they did rise, so they got fluffier, okay? I hope I didn't steam this up too much. So, let's pull one of these out, take a look at it, and say, oh yes, that is perfect. It is cooked, you can tell, because remember the feel of the raw dough? Well, this is steamed dough, so it's firmer, and that also means it's hot all the way through. So we can pull all these out, and we can eat them and have a wonderful meal, okay? And food is a great thing, okay? I like good food, so give this a try, experiment with this, let me know what you think. And thank you once again. This is A Salt and Buttery with intent to satisfy.